had this nagging suspicion she was seeing someone else. She'd light up with these big smiles and chuckles whenever she was texting, though she'd insist it was just her mom. Then there were those late nights at work. But when I checked with her coworkers, they casually mentioned she'd left hours earlier. When I confronted her, she brushed it off, claiming they were just cracking jokes. But the final straw, one morning, she went out to grab milk around 11:30 a.m. and didn't show back up until 2 hours later. Milk? Seriously? Looking back, here's my hard-earned advice for anyone stuck in this kind of mess. Don't try to play detective yourself. Just hire a private investigator. Those folks know their stuff and can dig up the kind of proof that will come in handy if things end up in court. Now, fast forward to her birthday a few months later. Why wait so long, you ask? Well, I needed time. Time to gather all the evidence my lawyer might need, scout out a new place to live, and frankly, plan my exit strategy. And of course, it was supposed to happen on her birthday. It's a classic, isn't it? When I asked her what she wanted this year, she practically pushed me to go on a trip with my friends. Stay at home, I said. The work is too stressful and I hate thinking about getting older, she replied. Yes, of course. Very subtle. That's when I noticed a bottle of bubbly and 2 glasses stashed away so. I did what any reasonable person would do. I pretended to leave town with my buddies. Then I called her parents, her sister, and a few of her closest friends to come over. I told everyone the plan. We'd surprise her with a big, over-the-top birthday entrance, complete with noisemakers and holiday cheer. Sounded fun, right? And oh, it definitely was. Just not in the way anyone expected. At 8:30 sharp the next morning, her family and I gathered near our place. There were about 8 of us, all excited and armed with party buzzers. We took the elevator together, trying to stifle our laughter. Once we reached the apartment, I quietly unlocked the door. Everyone tiptoed in, holding their breath as we moved toward the bedroom. Her mom had the cake, grinning like it was the best idea ever. I gave the signal for the door to be opened, and we all yelled, "Surprise!" But boy, were we the ones surprised. There she was, mid-act, in a very compromising position with her lover, frozen like a deer in headlights. The chaos that followed was pure comedy gold. Her mom dropped the cake straight to the floor. Her sister screamed so loud it probably echoed down the block. Her dad, well, let's just say his vocabulary, would have made a sailor blush. I played my part perfectly, pretending to be utterly shocked while her friends lost it, shushing everyone out of the room and shouting at her. Meanwhile, my now wife was a complete wreck, crying, screaming, and trying to explain the unexplainable. And her lover? He was scrambling to pull up his pants, bolting out of the apartment like his life depended on it. Honestly, it might have been the best birthday gift I ever gave myself. Of course, she didn't take any responsibility. Nope, she pointed fingers at everyone else. Her parents got scolded for showing up unannounced. Her sister was called awful, and her friends didn't escape her wrath either. As for me, she unleashed every insult she could muster. But hey, when the dust settled, I couldn't help but laugh. Justice, after all, has a funny way of showing up when you least expect it. I loved this woman for 2 years, truly, and yet there she was, screaming at me for wrecking her fling with some random guy. The audacity, right? It felt like something out of a bizarre sitcom. Fast forward a few years and life's looking pretty good. I met someone new, an amazing woman. But this time, I'm in no rush to tie the knot. I've learned my lesson about patience and taking things slow. Now I'm pouring my energy into the things I love, traveling, diving into my hobbies, and just soaking up the little joys of life. As for I haven't the faintest idea what she's up to these days, and honestly, I couldn't care less. The one thing I do know is that every year, when her birthday rolls around, it still makes me chuckle. That wild day remains one for the books. Next story. 5 years ago, I discovered that my wife had been unfaithful. A friend had tipped me off, mentioning that he'd seen her with a man, someone who was hugging her in a way that made it clear they weren't just friends. From that moment, I started keeping an eye on her, waiting for the truth to unfold. Sure enough, one day when she left the house, I followed her. I watched as she got out of the car, met up with a tall, sharp-looking guy, and kissed him with passion right there in the street. Then, they jumped into his fancy car and drove off. I stood there, frozen, feeling this deep stab of pain, betrayal, and disbelief. The kind of hurt that cuts to the core. When she returned home later, I confronted her and told her exactly what I had seen. She didn't try to hide anything. Instead, she asked me to pack my bags and get out without making a scene. Her words stung like fire. "You're a joke," she yelled. "You're almost 27, and we're still stuck in this crummy rented place. You spend your nights fishing and drinking instead of doing something with your life. I can't stand you. Get lost." The insults just kept pouring out, one after another, until she grabbed her things and left. I stood there stunned, feeling like everything I thought I knew about us had just shattered. It felt like a punch in the gut. I'd always believed she was my partner, my support, someone I could count on for the long haul. But I was wrong. Soon after, I found out that the man she'd left me for was wealthy, and I couldn't help but think she was in it for his money. At first, I was hurt. I felt betrayed, and honestly, it stung for a while. But then, something inside me snapped. Instead of sinking into self-pity, I told myself I'd show her. I would get successful, become wealthy, just to prove her wrong. Her words about me being a loser lit a fire under me. I worked harder than ever, pushing myself day and night. My friend and I came up with a business idea, which slowly but surely began to take shape. Within a year, I was earning more than $10,000 a month. A year later, I was earning over $70,000 a month. Business was booming, and so was I. I got involved in sports, became interested in singing, started traveling, and discovered new hobbies. My life was no longer about making ends meet. I wanted to live, grow, and become what I had once dreamed of. Out of the blue, my wife called me, begging for a meeting. Reluctantly, I agreed. We sat down in a cafe and she began pouring her heart out. Apparently, her lover had promised her marriage only to turn his back on her when things got tough. She ranted about her dead-end job and how she was stuck in a shabby little apartment that barely cost anything. She looked completely different, heavier, older. Her once radiant beauty faded. She begged me to give her another chance, to somehow fix everything. I stared into her eyes, took her hands in mine, and repeated the very words she'd once thrown at me. "Go to hell, loser." I stood up, walked away, and didn't even glance back. Surprisingly, I felt no sympathy for her. If anything, I was filled with relief and a strange joy. Justice had been served. A short while later, I married a kind, down-to-earth woman, and we had 2 beautiful children together. Life settled into a wonderful routine, and the whole mess with my faded from my mind like a bad dream I'd long forgotten. Cheating Secrets podcasts like me